Greetings and welcome to Act for Life, Living Our Best Life. My name is Nico. I'm a mental health counselor based here in Tokyo and available to clients internationally via my online office. In this series of live streams and recordings, I will be delving deeply into the principles behind ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and how we can apply those principles to ourselves in order to build the lives that we want. ACT is a highly practical methodology that includes mindfulness practice, meditation, and self-inquiry, driven overall by a sense of curiosity and willingness to change. As this is a relatively new channel, please go through the usual process of liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment, as it seems it does help the algorithm. So, without further ado, let's jump into the matter at hand. As always, open up, be present, and do what matters. And welcome to episode 2, Act for Life, where we'll be looking at the choice point and how we can use that to direct our values. I'm looking at my monitor on my left here to see what is actually going out on the live feed. There is a substantial delay, so whatever happens in front of me here takes a few seconds before it bounces back from the ether to my iPad. Anyway, that's what it is. Right, so last week we looked at identifying our values and applying them to different domains in our lives and seeing which values were predominant in which domains. And I used the domain of profession to rediscover the values that are important to me in my particular profession as a counselor and educator. So, if I remember correctly, they were learning, connection, and integrity. And even if we do our values sort and have them in the forefront of our minds at first, sometimes these things do tend to fade. So it's a good idea to reconfirm what our driving purposes are and why we do what we do for clarity later on. So in today's session, we have this wonderful picture of a person standing out at the edge of the shore, or the edge of the sea, with hands outspread in a welcoming gesture. And that's what ACT is all about, really. We want to be curious, we want to be welcoming, we want to be willing to accept what's coming rather than shrinking away and hiding in our darkness. We want to expand and to keep on working towards the life that we want. In today's session, we'll begin with a brief mindfulness practice to get ourselves grounded. Then we'll look at Plato's cave and how that is a view, even a current view of our existence these days. It's an ages-old concept, but it's something that still rings true. And what we can do to get out of the cave by using the choice point as developed by Russ Harris in connection with Stephen Hayes. We'll see more about those two later on. Okay, so let's put our view in here. Here we go, there's me. And let's look at our next slide here. So this is something called the simple breath. And if you're familiar with Anapana meditation, this is exactly the same thing that we do in Anapana meditation. But it's a technique that can be used anywhere to calm the mind, to make us less anxious, less worried, less panicked in a way. If we are experiencing a panic attack of some sort, the key to get out of that state of panic is, first of all, the awareness that we are in panic, and then a technique that helps us to calm the nervous system. And the simple breath is the one that works. It really does work. We can practice this in our homes, wherever we are. And once we get familiar with this, we can do this standing up. But for today, let's sit in a straight back chair and focus awareness on the breathing. So as in Anapana, what we do is we tend to breathe in and out through the nose with an awareness of this area of the nose, from the bridge of the nose to the side of the nostrils, left and right, and across the upper lip. So what we're doing is ignoring what is happening in other parts of the body. Let me just adjust that. So any other sensations might be tightness in the chest or shallow breathing in the chest. What we're doing is we're focusing our attention on a very small area of the body and mentally ignoring any other sensations that might be arising in our environment. So we're going very quickly and deeply to a small area that we have control over. We may not have control over the reactions in our body in a state of panic, but when we consciously become aware of the fact that we are in panic and that we can control where we focus our breath, that's the beginning of the change that we want. So initially we don't worry about the length or the quality of the breath. It can be short. If you recall any state of panic, the breath tends to be short and quick and shallow. So let it appear as it is without doing anything to it. Just be aware of the fact that this breath is happening. So then we want to bring our awareness to the actual process of breathing. And we want to focus our attention just at the entrance to the nostrils above the upper lip here. So we're narrowing our attention even more. And we want to become aware of any sensations that arise there. So you'll note that as we breathe in, there's a spot of coolness just here in temperature. So the breath is cool as we take it into our bodies. And then notice on the exhalation that the breath is warm. So let's try that a few times. So we might notice other sensations that arise on the skin of the nose at that point in time. There could be tingling, prickling, itching, all these kinds of things. The nose is a very sensitive area of the body, so we can feel many different things that we aren't usually aware of. So notice that as we become aware of the breath and the sensations and changes in temperature and all those kinds of things, that our breath naturally elongates on the exhalation. We can make this happen a little bit by just making sure our exhalation is longer than the inhalation. And as we do this, we bring calm to our system, to the vagus nerve. And the reason this works is because when we are in a state of relaxation, our breath is naturally subtle, soft, and long. And it indicates to our system that we are not in danger. There is no threat that we have to run away from, and that we are safe. So panic or anxiety, catastrophizing, those kind of mental conditions occur when we feel overwhelmed. And this breathing technique helps us to return to equanimity. And it does so rather quickly. So practice this breath for yourselves in the safety of your own home. And then when you need to, when you're feeling anxious or nervous or fearful, first of all, check that you are safe in your environment. And then try this Anapana, the simple breath technique. Okay, so let's go into the main section of our journey today. And I'm just adjusting the slides a little bit. There we go. So here we have Plato's cave. This is an ages-old idea from our philosopher friends. And it looks a bit like a stomach, doesn't it? But we can see that there are various features of this cave that need a bit of explanation. But we have where are we here? Okay. So, looking at the left side of the cave there, we can see some people seated facing the back wall of the cave, on which appear various projections. We also note that they are chained to their seats, so they're unable to move. But we find out something interesting later on about those chains. Also, their heads are held in place. They're immobilized, so they can't turn away from the image in front of them. They're compelled to see the image projected on the wall in front of them. So it's the only thing they are able to see. Okay. And they cannot turn their heads away from the projection. They cannot even see the projector behind them. So what's happening is that they see the image, and that's all they know and experience. So they start thinking that the images they see projected in front of them are reality. So they start thinking and believing that the images are truth. So the question that may arise in our minds, well, who is projecting that image? And what's the point of that projection? Yeah. So the images represent conditioned responses. So these are many and various in our lives. Obligations, family obligations, relationship obligations, obligations to our role as an office manager, what we have to do, all those kinds of things. Societal restrictions. We may be born into a family that values its public image. So the public image is most important above our own concerns. We may be conditioned by the formal education that we receive, and certainly that is true in the sense of when we are younger, we have no control over the curriculum that is taught us, right? You may be going to a very conservative religious school where the curriculum is restricted according to the faith that your family subscribes to. Or you may be going to a completely different school where the curriculum is wide and all-inclusive. So, of course, that has an effect on how we grow up and what we see as reality before us. Social norms, expectations, media manipulation, these are all things that are part of our conditioning, especially in this day and age when we carry with us the ubiquitous iPhone or phone, and we're all guilty of this. It seems that way, that we have to check our phones every 20 seconds to see what the messages are, or again, it's some kind of addiction, you can call it manipulation by technology in a way. So once we become aware of the fact that we are being conditioned or have been conditioned, we realize that we're able to release ourselves from these chains that hold us, because the chains, the shackles, aren't locked. So that's a representation of the free will that we remain, that we still have. But before that action happens, we have to become aware of the fact that we are being manipulated in some way. That the situation we find ourselves in is not the reality that we think it is. So in this sequence here, we see a person making their way behind the projector and climbing up onto the ledge behind the projector. We still don't know who the person or people are behind the projections, but maybe that's another matter. And slowly they set themselves free. So they move toward the exit, and not really being sure of where it will lead, but they are being driven by curiosity. And that's a central aspect of ACT, isn't it? We are curious to see where this path will lead, and with our curiosity at the base of our actions, we construct a new path for ourselves. So we see the end of the cave coming up, and on the other side of the cave, there's a whole new world. Some people could say, well, life experience is a series of caves that we work ourselves out of, and this new environment is just really another bigger cave, but maybe that's the way it is. But whatever happens in this new environment that we find ourselves, we take some time to adjust because there are new rules, new ways of behaving, and all those kinds of things. It's very much the same as Neo in the Matrix, being released from the Matrix into an environment which, for all descriptive purposes, isn't a very easy one to be released into. But it has its own challenges. But they realize, looking back, that they've been held in darkness all this time. So when we say in ACT, be aware, open up, and do what's necessary, it is a gradual opening up into a new environment that we are experiencing. Yeah. So, well, how does that relate to our next point? In ACT, we have the choice point, which is at the core of this process of change that we are engaged in. And it answers the question, how do we create the life that we want? What do we actually do once we have identified our values? So, okay, what's next? So this is what's next. And we have two wonderful people here. So Dr. Stephen Hayes, who was the formulator of ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, and Dr. Russ Harris, who's based in Australia, who's done a lot of work in bringing ACT to the forefront, and continues to do so. So in a later presentation, I'll talk about Stephen Hayes and the ACT matrix and how we can develop psychological flexibility. But before then, it's important to consider what Russ Harris brought to the picture, and that is the choice point. So this is what the choice point is. Okay, so what? But let's fill in the picture there. So at the top of our screen, we have unconscious behaviors, and then who we want to be. So unconscious behaviors and conscious behaviors. So before we come to the point of choice, we have to become aware of the fact that we are in the cave, as it were. Yeah. So no change can happen until that awareness arises. And that awareness may arise through something that challenges our lives. So that is the role of difficulty. It can be a physical challenge, mental challenge, something that calls to question who we are. So without that introspection, we are essentially stuck in the cave until it happens, right? And then we start thinking, well, hang on a minute. Who do I really want to be? And what's holding me back? So we've got the words hooked and unhooked there, and fusion and diffusion. I'll define fusion and diffusion a little bit more later on. But when we are hooked by unconscious behaviors, we are in Plato's cave. Yeah. So some things that keep us in Plato's cave is replying no or not yet to opportunities that arise. Yeah. We feel insecure, we feel unsafe, whatever. We want to be in an environment where we know what's going to happen. So anything that presents itself, which may be an opportunity, these are the kinds of statements that precede that answer, right? Yes, but I have to look after my family. Yes, but I want to achieve the next step in my promotion or this career path. Yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. I would like to do this. Yes, sure I will, but later on, yeah? Maybe later. And I can't right now. I'm just too busy with too many things. And at the root of all that might be the simple factor of fear. Let me transition back to that. So we have all these things that represent us in Plato's cave. And like I said before, we remain in Plato's cave until something happens in our environment that challenges us to the point where we are forced to look at something different. So those are the situations, thoughts, and feelings. So the situations could be an external thing that brings us to a point of change, or the thoughts and feelings can be as a result of, say, beginning a meditation practice where part of what we do is a self-inquiry. And as we inquire into the nature of ourselves, we start to think, well, why am I having these repeated thoughts? Where do they come from? And even when we're able to observe our thoughts, our ruminations, we understand that quite often those thoughts are habits and that they can be released. We can unhook ourselves from those things. So we start asking ourselves, how do I live the life that I want? And we begin the process of exiting the cave. When we do this, we have to be willing. Yeah, and willingness is a curiosity, but there has to be 100% willingness. There has to be no room for, oh, yes, but, or I can't, I have to, or something like that. It's an unconditional yes. What we have here in the present situation, say we are anxious, we are fearful. Do we want to live like that all the time? What can we do to change? Yeah. So that's the root of the crux of the problem. So what we do when we exit the cave, we cross the threshold, and this is a reference to the hero's journey, in a sense that Campbell came up with, or explained. The hero's journey is at the core of many a myth and legend. And also we'll see later on how the hero's journey is actually an unfolding and unhooking a diffused state that leads us to further explore. So here are the definitions of being hooked, fused, and defused, unhooked. So when we are fused, you may recognize this state. If you think back to your youth, how concerned you were about how other people, what you thought other people thought of you, especially in our teens. We want so much to be accepted by our peer group that we will change ourselves in order to behave in the same manner as the peer group. Fashion, the way we speak, the way we behave, all to gain acceptance. And, that's where the colloquial expressions come from, the way the youth speak is something that's really, really much designed to gain the approval of the peer group. It's not a bad thing, but if we are still doing that when we're in our late 20s and 30s and 40s, then perhaps it's something to look at. Far out, man. Yes. Yes. So that comes to mind. But when we're defused, we start looking at our thoughts and feelings and noticing them rather than being caught up in them, right? So we are not being dragged into the very scenarios that we've cooked up for ourselves. We start thinking, okay, excuse me, this is not really me. Yeah. And we start thinking that, okay, who's really in charge here? And how do my thoughts and feelings arise? And what can I do to change those? So these are all unhooked and methods of getting into our lives that we want. So the choice point in action. So before we actually develop a clear purpose, before we do our value sort for self-definition, we have to reach a point of being aware that we are in a situation that can be changed. So decide what you want. What do I stand for? That's a very good question to ask ourselves. What do I stand for? Yeah. And this arises more often than not, right? If you're in a work situation where one of your colleagues is being bullied by the boss, do you lend support to that person? Do you give them options of fighting back? Or do you just think, thank God it's not me this time? Yeah. What do you stand for? If you're in the same situation as you see somebody else in, do you help or do you stand back? Do you engage or do you remove yourself from perceived danger? Those kinds of things. So once we've identified our values, we take the first steps and we begin the journey. And the journey begins once we are aware of the fact that we are aligning ourselves with those fundamental values that we have identified for ourselves. So the actions in line with the values begin the journey. So we start to unhook ourselves and we bring change into our existence. So here's a little quote. I think I'm saying, if you don't know what you want, then you will do what others want. That's a realization, isn't it? Or you'll end up doing something to fill in the time. So moving pointlessly, aimlessly from one thing to the other without any particular purpose. And, life is a finite experience. So if we do that our whole lives, then essentially we waste an opportunity. So how can we unhook ourselves? We avoid impulsive actions. So impulse buying, for example, is something that maybe we do because we want a dopamine fix. We want something we see it and we think, oh, we need to have that. And the impulse carries through into actually buying what we see in front of us. But if we give ourselves time to think, so we pause, we create space between the impulse to buy that new shiny watch. And we step back and we think, well, okay, all right. Let's see if I really need that. Is it something that will be important in my life? And once you give yourself time to think and disengage and create the space, the real action will surface, ones that are in line with your values. So it's going to be a considered response that we're wanting. If the answer is still yes, I need this watch, then go ahead, right? But if you think, well, the money I would have spent on that watch, I could have bought some flowers for my wife. Ooh, that's a lot of flowers. But the reality check, the present reality, what's important in the present moment is what surfaces, and that's how we move forward on our valued path. So what's holding me back? That's the question that, say, on the next step of the path, is a question that you can answer for yourself. So it's really about something that we call informed choice. Yeah. So the values inform the choice, and the choice leads to action or valued action. It sounds all very, very, very simple, but that's the key to this presentation, the choice point, how it works. Okay, so check, avoid impulsive action, create space, disengage, consider your response, check the reality. Is this real? And what's holding me back from engaging in valued action? And then if all those are in place, let's do it. Okay, so once we are engaged in the path of choices, we sometimes are able to get a wider perspective and see the road further ahead from a different view. And this, I think it's a famous picture, but we see the road ahead from a different perspective. We're either in the top of the hill going down, or we see ourselves at the bottom, and we can see the various turns and changes. But we also notice that the path is going up. Yeah. Okay. So I believe that is the end of our session today. So if you have any comments or things you'd like to add, please do so in the comment section of this the stream, should I say. I haven't been able to, let's have a look. I'll put a comment in there for myself. Well, that seems to work. But at the moment, this is a live broadcast, and I am the only member of the audience. But that's par for the course, I believe. So what you can do, and what I wish people would do, is to go through the process of liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment, so that eventually I build up the audience over time, and yes, build a income stream for myself in retirement. That's what this is all about, really. But I do enjoy these presentations because it reminds me of the principles of ACT, and also why I am engaged in this, which is, again, a learning process. So thank you for engaging, or later on, thank you for viewing the recording of it, which I'll load up once it's been processed by the system. So thank you again, and our next broadcast, our next stream will be next Friday, 10 a.m. Japanese Standard Time. So be well, open up, and do what matters. Take care.